Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a special episode of Fourth and Frames. I'm your host, Rhett Manuel, with my co-hosts, Jorge Edwards, Nate Markham, and Drew Scott, as we welcome in our special guest, Andy Behrens of Yahoo Sports, where tonight we'll discuss some redraft strategy and potential late-round league winners heading into the 2023 fantasy football season. Without further ado, let's make it happen. So before we get into tonight's show, make sure to head over to our YouTube page and subscribe for more actual fantasy football content and advice from topics ranging from Dynasty and Redraft, Best Ball, DFS, and of course our specialty IDP. No matter what the topic, we've got you covered. Also, make sure to head over to Fantasy and Frames to read our latest article postings and see our player rankings. Also, our Scott Fish Bowl ADPs, over 100 mock drafts went into that as well. And if you are on Twitter, please remember that we can't see your questions or comments. So please head on over to YouTube so we can answer your questions over there this evening. So now let me introduce you guys to the president of the Fantasy Sports Writers Association, a published author and a man who has written all over the place, NBA.com, ESPN.com, and is currently the lead writer and fantasy analyst at Yahoo.com. He is year after year one of the most accurate rankers over at Fantasy Pros expert consensus ranking competition, and even has the hardware to prove it from 2019 and 2013. So Mr. Andy Behrens, welcome to the show. What's good, man?
Hey, thanks for having me on. It is a pleasure to be here. It is an honor to be here. That was good walk-up music, by the way. Really nice intro music. Like that a whole lot.
Nice.
Yeah, that's all Jorge's handiwork, man. So I have to ask you, being a published author.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to compliment Jorge. I retract the statement.
Trash music. No, I got you.
Two questions I need to ask you. First off, as a published author, which one of them is your favorite? And also tell me why The Fast and the Furious is the most adorable book title of all time.
I'm glad you called that out. That's probably that's got a little like Bears fan element to it. It involves a former Bear. I mean, it's a dog story, right? It's for it's basically a book written for like middle grade boys, middle grade readers, trying to catch guys before they either keep reading for the rest of their lives or stop reading entirely. So I really enjoyed writing that. I think it holds up really well. So that's probably my favorite of. I wrote a series of books when I was I guess it started right around 2006. Mostly for like young adults, middle grade readers, and really enjoyed it. That is actually probably my favorite. It is about a boy who enters dog agility contests with his dog. It was really fun to write.
Dude, that's awesome. Because as a writer myself,
it was actually really fun to research. Like watching a lot of dog agility videos at that point in time was pretty awesome. It was a great way to spend the day.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's fun. And I have to ask you a second question. Our past few guests, we've kind of had this thing going where they have managed to sing a little bit for us. Are you willing to do that for us tonight as well? Is that a no?
No pressure.
What am I singing? Are we
Whatever
all singing?
You want. Whatever
we all
feels good.
sing the same song.
Your favorite
song. I don't want that. You don't want that. Nobody wants that.
The Pretenders? No.
What the hell did Bob Lung sing? Bob doesn't sing.
He didn't. But Bob Harris is the one who started with us a couple weeks ago who did that. So he says in the chat, "I blame me."
Yeah, that's his
fault.
Bob's
not a sane man. Bob's not a sane man.
And then it's Bob's fault, but Howard enabled us a couple weeks back whenever he extended this. So now we're like, oh, let's just keep trying and see what happens. So no pressure, but yeah. Anyway, so
we'll see if we fall into it organically. But I certainly can't be prompted.
So you're saying there's a chance. All right. I love it. All right. So guys, just a reminder before we get into talking about draft strategy, just a reminder, head over to YouTube for those comments, and we'd love to have you over there. So we wanted to go a little bit into draft strategy tonight because draft season is coming up. Everybody is excited about it. And so we wanted to kind of just first start off talking about some draft things and just strategy and maybe get into some late round guys as well. So whenever you're ready, Jorge.
All right. So Andy, got a question for you. It's kind of like a two-parter. So bear with me for a second. We're seeing, a lot of leagues now switching to having multiple flex spots in their starting rosters. So when we're talking, specifically in half PPR or PPR formats, in later rounds of your draft, do you prefer when it comes to receiving options to look for more of the boom or bust wide receivers, or those who have like a low fantasy point floor, but their target volume remains steady? That makes sense.
Yeah. So first of all, I favor the notion of adding flex spots generally, right? Like it is the quickest, easiest way to make a league deeper, more competitive, and to make it less dependent on like one person who happens to draft like a league winning player. It makes everything. I think it makes everything more enjoyable, makes everything more competitive. I also think that like the NFL in general, we talk about this with like tight ends and wide receivers a lot. The lines have really blurred between positions, right? So like I think more positions that are just open to receivers and tight ends generally, instead of we need to have a separate tight end spot, separate wide receiver spots, and all that. I think generally flexes are good. I don't mind some of the leagues that I play in where it's like a quarterback and then just a whole bunch of flexes. I think that's I think it's a really good format. To answer your question though, basically every pick that I'm making outside the top, I don't know, 4 or 5 rounds, 6 rounds, I guess I would argue that you should just be asking all the time, like, what does it look like for this player if things go right? Which is a little different question from like, what is this guy's absolute ceiling? Because anybody's ceiling is a pretty low probability scenario, I think, that probably involves multiple injuries to other guys. So just like what if things mostly go right, and you're gonna whiff on a ton of draft picks, which is like the dirty secret of fantasy football, right? Like even on your very best rosters. I always like to challenge people. I always like to write an article once a year where like I go back and I look at my absolute best team that I drafted the prior year, however many wins, your 12-win team that won the title. And like you're going to find that if you go back and look at the draft, you probably got like 2 or 3 big things right. Maybe you got a couple of other really small things right. And then there's like a half dozen picks that were just hilarious misses. It's, you didn't nail the draft the way that you remember it, and that's totally fine. So the basic idea at the draft table is just take big swings and take them constantly. I'd make an exception for like, I'm in a couple leagues that are like 16 teams, 20 teams. And there you really, you get past the first like 5 rounds and it's terrible. And you really just need to start hitting singles and doubles and, just navigate your way through the mid and late rounds with guys who are actually going to be playing. But you can't approach like a 10 or a 12 team league like that. So this is a really long way of saying that I'm not out there looking for, KJ Osborne. I'm not out there looking for Russell Gage types. I don't mind volatility. I don't mind a super high variance player, especially as a flex, as a wide receiver 3. Like, give me that, vintage Will Fuller type where like twice a year, 3 times a year, they would have the supernova week that absolutely won you a matchup. And yeah, if they were quiet in some of their other games, it was fine, right? You're getting 2 for 30. A lot of guys can give you 2 for 30. There's some people who don't have it in them to ever give you like the 4 for 200 and 2 touchdown games. So I'm looking for that. And you also just a general piece of advice. You just really have to get comfortable with the idea that you're gonna turn over like a third of your roster by the end of like the 3rd week of the season. So again, it's just okay to take huge swings and miss occasionally.
So the follow-up to that would be, even though we are talking, half PPR or PPR formats, for those who are implementing 0 RB and they're waiting to the later rounds to really build up the depth at the running back position, do you still try and get those guys who have the target upside, or are you looking for more of the running backs who have more, goal line opportunities in this particular scenario?
Yeah, some of that is really about scoring settings and whether it's full PPR or anything else. Because there's a place for the guys who you can comfortably say are going to catch like 40 balls, 45 balls. But again, generally my sort of overarching philosophy is that I want to find guys where, like, if things go right for them, they're 80% of the touches. I'm not looking for guys who, like, if everything goes right and they have a good camp and good preseason, they fall into a rotational role where they might, where like the ceiling and the floor kind of looks like 30% of the touches and they get some consistent where I'm not looking for that. Like, you don't win because of those guys unless it's like a 16 team, 20 team league. You win because you get some huge things right, so it's got to be. Yeah, we'll get into some names later of guys that, I might be looking at in the late rounds, but it's some of those rookie backs. It's the guys who just generally profile as players who, one or two injuries occur, or they exceed expectations just a little bit, and all of a sudden they're falling into 15, 16, 17 touches, or they're a player who has a significant role on an offense that I just happen to think is going to score 30 points a game, right? Like you can back into an amazing season from like Jerick McKinnon when he's not even necessarily playing 50% of the snaps, right? But it's got to be one of those super rich offensive environments.
Gotcha. Drew, what do you got for us?
I think Nate had a follow up, but he was muted.
Okay.
I was muted. I am I like to set the bar low for everybody. Like I'm the anti Andy drafter. I'm going for the floor play for him in the 10th round. But I did have a question because I hear a lot of, I've heard it 50-50, 6 in one hand, half dozen in the other. Do you back up your running back with the with your handcuff? Are you the opposite, which is what I think many of us believe is you take the handcuff on the team, so then you get the best of both. So you're not taking Najee and Jaylen Warren. You're taking maybe Najee and Chase Brown, or the alternative.
Yeah, I don't necessarily. Well, so the Bengals offense would be a little bit different. Like I don't mind tying myself to a situation where I absolutely know the backup would thrive, but I've got to really believe in that player, or I've got to really just believe in the idea that and the Bengals are that sort of team where they can realistically lead the NFL in scoring and total yardage, right? Like so that might be a little bit different. Also, I'm a huge fan of Brown. I thought that guy was way underdrafted. I thought he was pretty clearly one of the 5 best running backs in college football last year. Like you just can't tell me that there were 5 better backs than that guy. He was incredible against the best defenses on his schedule. He gave it to Iowa. He gave it to Michigan. Like that kid is really good. So he might be somebody that I would actually, stash for the contingent value. But for the most part, I want guys who are going to have a little bit of standalone value too, because when you start drafting those guys who are just pure backups, those are usually the picks that work out for someone else, because you're gonna drop those guys. Like, you're gonna get in it and you're gonna be like 1 and 2, and there's gonna be like a hot waiver ad, and the first guy that you drop is the backup running back who has 6 touches on the season. Right. Like realistically, you're just not gonna carry that guy and then it's November and he's the hot waiver ad, right? So like you're gonna take him and you can feel good about that, but there's no way that as a practical matter, you don't leave those guys on your bench unless you have a massive bench. They don't just sit there for 2 months while they don't do anything for you.
Mm-hmm.
So Jorge, let me ask you a question real quick on everybody's favorite positions, quarterbacks and tight ends. For years, it's been hammered home to us that it's better to wait on quarterbacks and instead target positions that we have to start multiple of, like receivers and running backs, and stay away from the onesie positions, assuming that it's a one quarterback league. Now, it's also been told to us that lately, if you don't draft one of the elite tight ends, that it's better to hold off and target every other position as well. With that being said, has the influx of dual threat quarterbacks and the increasing amount of tight end premium leagues skewed your draft strategy when it comes to drafting these positions in your leagues, both in the industry heavy leagues and in your home leagues?
So, I understand, what tight end premium scoring is supposed to do. I get it. You're increasing the value of these tight ends. You're bumping them up a few points per game over the course of the season. I still rather just build around, other positions, to be honest with you, and take a late flyer on some of these tight ends that could have, great opportunity down the road. In terms of the quarterback position, again, I like the fact that you threw in home league or industry leagues. For a home league, I have no problem taking Jalen Hurts early or Pat Mahomes early. Like, one, this is supposed to be fun. You want to root on the players that you're fans of, and with the fact that they do have this dual threat rushing passing upside, it just makes a lot of sense. Especially in these one quarterback leagues. For industry leagues, I guess it really, you have to read the room. I don't want to give you like a blanket statement that says yes, you should target these guys because they could basically be your first RB and quarterback in the same position. So reading the room is definitely important there. But for me, like in an industry league, we were fortunate enough to participate for the first time in the Kings Classic last year. And I think for me in the snake draft, at least the Dawson division, I think I took my quarterback in the 5th round, and I was drafting Justin Herbert then, and some would say maybe that was a little bit too early. I didn't care. I love Justin Herbert, and he performed, not as well as he did in previous seasons, but he was serviceable as my one quarterback. So it really depends on reading the room. But yeah, these dual threat quarterbacks, I mean, they're proving to be quite a commodity early in drafts, this year, especially going forward, to be honest with you.
Yeah. You mentioned in home leagues drafting guys that you're a fan of because it's fun watching them. Let me ask you this: in home leagues where your opponents well, do you ever reach for guys that that they might be big fans of and try to flip them after the draft?
If Nate and I were in more home leagues, I would be sniping Patrick Mahomes from him left and right, just because. He's shaking his head. No, you wouldn't.
I'm not drafting Mahomes that high.
How high is too high?
I don't know. I don't have an answer. I also, Andy, I tell these idiots that I also don't let people know when I get sniped. That is my absolute rule: is do not ever show anger when someone takes your pick or that frustration, because if I take Drew and then St. Louis Scott Fishbowl together at opposite ends, and we've done so many mocks, I know round 7, 8 who he wants. He knows round 9, 10 who I want, and then it's a battle, and it's like, damn it. And so I'm not sniping Jorge and they're letting him know, because week 4, when my player's underperforming or overperforming, he gets 2-to-1 return because he knows that I actually wanted that person. So don't fall prey to that, Jorge. I'm not.
Oh no,
So,
I know you.
So Nate, what you're telling me is that whenever we hear you go silent in a chat is when you actually feel some type of way, right?
I do talk a lot. So yes,
gotta have a tell.
Right. That is it. Yeah. Good call. So now it's just talk more is what you were telling me to
There
do
you
somehow.
go. Good pick.
Good luck.
Good pick.
I will say
So
that if I'm mocking, and especially if I'm mocking with people that I'm later going to be in like real drafts with and real leagues that I care about, I will almost never take a player that I really like. I stick so close to ADP on everybody in the draft, but I would never reach for a guy at a mock, right? Like that's just such a sometimes you'll do it if you're like doing it for a magazine and it's just a guy that you happen to want to write about. But beyond that, I'm usually about as chalky as you can get in a mock, and then we just figure out who people in the league actually like.
That's an interesting strategy. So, Drew, let me go ahead and ask you this. We've all been doing this fantasy stuff for years now, whether it's been just in home leagues or whatever, doing it in the industry or just all around. But as we've come across, I wanted to ask you, what position or skill set are you personally most comfortable with in a player when you're taking a chance on them in the later rounds for possible league winning upside? So what are you looking for?
If you would ask me this question like 3-4 years ago, I probably would have said quarterback because I was a big late round quarterback guy, but that is kind of starting to change for me. I'm still not at the point where I'm willing to go with like the Mahomes, Hurts, Allen in one quarterback leagues, like taking them in the 3rd round. I'm still not there yet, but I will take a shot if like Lamar, Justin Fields, if one of those guys falls to me around 5. I like going there as opposed to like I used to not. It was almost like a goal to make sure I was the last person to take a quarterback in a 12-team league. Now more so, I mean, I don't want to give away too much for what we're going to talk about later in the show, but I was looking at some of like the late round targets and noticed a pretty common theme that almost all the ones that I picked out were running backs. So I would say that running back's probably the position I'm most comfortable taking late round shots on. And I guess that's probably why zero running back is such a popular strategy now. So I would say if I had to pick one position, it would be running back.
In terms of skill set, whether it's speed, whether it's pass catching upside, Nate, Jorge, do you have anything y'all are really looking for in those situations or what?
So it's a great question. I hate to draw comparisons between best ball and redraft because I want to keep these entities separate, but I think the notion of what Andy was saying a little bit earlier, like, given who's going to perform, who has the potential to perform really highly in these weeks down the road. You're totally chasing upside, I think, the later you're getting in your draft. So, for example, if I'm in a non-PPR league, I'm looking at average depth of target. I'm looking at, yards after the catch. I'm looking at these big play people who are not going to benefit from the targets and the receptions, so to speak, in terms of the total number, but who are getting the chunk yardage plays, and then of course, as we get more specialized in the half and then in the full, then that becomes actually a little bit more complicated because now it's like, are you substituting, yardage for target volume? And is there a payoff there? Is there some type of trend that you're noticing in a player over the past couple seasons or in the offense, so to speak? We could talk about wide receivers and tight ends who get open down the field, but if you have a wide receiver whose average depth of target is like 16 yards. I'm just throwing out hypothetical examples, but your quarterback is only really throwing the ball 10 yards down the field and isn't really targeting these deep threats. Then why are you going after these people to begin with on those offenses? So, I think it depends on the scoring format, like and that will automatically help you figure out like what's the skill set that you're going for to target.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head as far as the second part of that, because if you understand team dynamic, I think many people get lost in look, this receiver had 26% of the targets, and he plays on a team that has 450 passing attempts versus a 22% target share on a 650 pass attempt, and you look at the blanket outline for so many players, and you build a narrative around that when understanding team dynamic from a team down. This goes into a whole different topic that we don't have time for, but Andy, I don't know do you do your own projections?
I do. Yeah.
And most projections usually start from the team dynamic down to determine how the team's going to perform. And then everything is kind of outlaid from there, because it's ridiculous to think I'm going to start with Michael Gallup, your guy, Jorge, and I'm going to say he's going to get 14.5% of the targets, and that's going to translate into 75 targets. You can't work backwards, albeit that crazy way. But I think it's an underappreciated area is looking at the team dynamic as a whole instead of segmented pieces.
And Nate, I love what you're saying about the team dynamics, because let's use an example from your Chiefs. I mean, last year, did anybody really see the year that Jerick McKinnon had coming on paper from previous seasons? But you start looking at that team and you're like, Pacheco doesn't do much pass catching. Mm-hmm. Clyde Edwards-Helaire never really panned out being the guy who he needed to be. So when they needed a safety net guy, it ended up being McKinnon's role. He ended up winning people a lot of leagues, and he was a guy that was going super late, if at all, in drafts. So the team dynamic thing is huge. I agree with that.
Yeah, he was a winner for sure. I wish I had more of him last year.
Well, I'll just say with McKinnon and I, entering last season, I'm not trying to rewrite myself as somebody who was like way in on Jerick McKinnon. I ended up with him in a couple leagues, but I wasn't like, he's not one of my guys year in and year out. But we actually, like, Damian Williams did that. Like, we'd already seen it done in Kansas City. Williams was more of a league winner than McKinnon. Sorry, my dog is a big Damian Williams fan.
Nice.
But Williams was as much or more of a league winner than McKinnon was, right? Like several years ago. So like we had already seen it in Kansas City with a running back who was only getting, a share of the touches and the snaps out of the backfield. Like, that's the value of an offense that can, that is scoring 28, 30, 32 points a game.
Yeah. And your dog speaks. If I speak dog, it said Damian Williams should have been MVP in the Super Bowl and got robbed.
He should have been.
I know. I won't disagree. I'm glad they won, but yeah, poor guy.
My dog believes that to her core. Yes.
We have that in common.
So, Andy, I want to bounce it back to you. And there is so much hype this year in redraft, particularly around these wide receivers. You look at these ADPs, and it seems like 8, 9 guys are going in that first round, especially in those half and full PPR formats. All of Yahoo's top 7 redraft ADP guys are guys that have this established upside in the pass catching department. So with that said, is there a guy going outside of the first round right now in Yahoo's ADP that you're comfortable taking in that first round and taking a little chance on?
Are you talking receivers specifically or any player in a position?
I'm talking first round and second round on in general that you would feel good about in first round.
Repeat that one more time. Receivers or running
or just anybody going outside of the first round, like
any position.
Well, I'll tell you, there's a couple guys that I just happen to have ranked as pretty clear first rounders who are not going there, who are generally ADP across different platforms are going generally in the second round. I think Nick Chubb is maybe the best running back in football and should go top 10. I've got him ranked approximately. Like I don't see a whole lot of reason to like we're splitting hairs with like Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, and Nick Chubb. I think Nick Chubb might be the best of those 3. Again, he's never had a season averaging less than 5 yards per carry. Not that yards per carry tells a full story, but he never misses. If he's healthy and he's playing, he never misses. The thing that is lacking in his game is exactly what you began your question with, the idea of, somebody who has bankable receiving volume. We could see a little more of it this year. Like it wouldn't be, now that he seemingly has the backfield to himself or mostly to himself, we could be looking at 40, 45 catches. That's enough for Nick Chubb because if he plays 15, 16 games, that guy's running for 1,450 yards, 1,500 yards, 1,600 yards. He's that good. It's hard to believe that he doesn't have a rushing title or 2 in him somewhere down the road. Like he's on that list of guys who can absolutely win Offensive Player of the Year, who can deliver a 2,000 scrimmage yard season, who can have like the running back year that, wins your league, right? 16 touchdowns, whatever your numbers are. That can be Nick Chubb. I think he deserves to go in the first round of pretty much any draft. Again, I think he's better than most of the first round running backs. Devonta Adams should be, in my view, a first rounder. All that guy does is catch 110 balls for 1,300 yards. Apparently it doesn't even really matter who his quarterback is. Devonta's great. He's the best separator in the game. I think he's the best receiver in football right now, which is not to say that I think he should be number 1 necessarily. Like I've got Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase at the top of my board, but there's not a better technician than Devonta Adams. So Devonta back into the first round is a pretty easy pick for me.
So let's extend upon that because now you have me curious. So Devonta Adams, who we know has so much consistency in his game and can separate and get that 1,300 yards, what separates a Devonta Adams from a Justin Jefferson at the top of the draft?
I like everything about Jefferson's situation. Number one, he's an ascending player. He's practically a child, right? Like he's so young. There's a really good chance that we have not seen Justin Jefferson's best season. If you ask me, like who's going to be the first guy to deliver a 2,000 receiving yard season, I think it's either Jefferson or Chase. I don't know which one it is. I think they're both great. The thing with Jefferson, of course, is that they're going to throw the ball 600 plus times. He and Thielen were like 1-2 in routes run last year. Like it's very, which that's a Jordan Addison, little Jordan Addison promotion for you. I think Addison's going to be really good too, but like, it's just such the usage there it's just such a sort of narrow tree, right? Like we know where the ball is going. Could Jefferson be targeted 200 times this year? Sure. Could he finish with 2,000 yards? Absolutely. I think he's that level of talent. I don't think there's a whole lot separating Devonta Adams, who again has just been like the best technician of probably the last 5 years. He's at least in a group like since Antonio Brown, maybe. He's just really wonderful to watch in isolation. Jefferson is just such a killer. Chase is such a killer. We're really splitting hairs when we're into that tier of receiver, but some of it with Jefferson is volume and the notion that we just simply haven't seen his best yet.
So if you're picking a spot in the first round, hard to say if you're sitting at 12 and you could have a chance to go Chubb, or maybe you sit at 8, 9, you could theoretically grab two of your guys that you have outside of the first round. Probably won't be able to sneak into the third by any chance. But do you feel more comfortable drafting early in these so far in any of the mocks you've done, or drafting later?
I can see a case for a lot of guys at number 1 is the thing. And whenever we're in a situation where I can make I can build a reasonable argument for, I don't know, 5, 6 guys as the number 1 pick in drafts. Mm-hmm. I've got Jefferson, but I'm not so firmly committed to it that I couldn't imagine going a different direction. Whenever we're in a situation like that, I generally think that it's a bit better to pick, if you can, like 5, 6, 7, something like that. It's funny. Football is the one, we've obviously I have access to a fair amount of data in Yahoo leagues, and I do those, people probably know, I do those little videos that pop up in your draft each year. And I talk about your draft slot to some extent. In baseball, in the NBA, you want to have the top pick in the draft. Like there is like those guys don't miss. Injury rates are a little bit different, right? In baseball and in other sports, and those guys just don't miss. Like if you can get the number 1 pick, you should take the number 1 pick. Football, we occasionally see years where, it's also, football is so driven by your best player and how your best player did in a given season. So we occasionally see years where like the 11th pick, the 12th pick has the best winning percentage, and that just doesn't come up in other sports. So football is, over the long sweep of time, it's still moderately beneficial to have an early pick, but it doesn't mean everything. And there are years where like Jonathan Taylor has the biggest season at running back, and he was available at like 8, right? There are absolutely years where the top picks miss there. And I feel like we're in a year now where I'm just happy to be in the middle of the draft anywhere.
So let's go ahead. Let's expound upon that. So outside of those top 3, 4 picks, is there anybody going in the middle of these drafts right now that you could see could be ascending and to be in that, having that Jonathan Taylor type season? Is it Nick Chubb? Is it somebody else?
Well, Nick Chubb can definitely do it, but he's round 2, end of round 2, start of round 3. Tony Pollard could definitely do it. I don't like there might be another, I don't know. There's still, we're at this problematic time of year, right? Where there's still some, like we're in this little game of musical chairs and they're not all filled, right? Like Fournette lands somewhere, Zeke lands somewhere, Dalvin Cook moves. And so there's still some things that have to shake out. But as of right now, like Tony Pollard is totally unchallenged. I don't know that I don't know that the Cowboys want this. I don't know that he wants it. I don't know that he's the type of player that's ever going to get 300 touches, but if he got close, that's a guy who can also challenge for the overall RB1, right? Because his, I don't need to, if you're watching, fantasy videos in the middle of June or at the end of June, you're on to Tony Pollard. I don't need to spin a Tony Pollard story for you. You know how good he is. If he has another season like last year, stays healthy, even more work comes his way, that's a guy who can be the overall RB1. Another name that I was talking about with did the Yahoo Fantasy Football forecast with Matt Harmon earlier today, and we're talking about Chris Olave. Olave could easily be the sort of player who this time next year we're talking about as a back end of the first round kind of player. My favorite thing about him as a rookie, we all talked about the air yards all year long, right? Like he was, they were looking deep downfield to Chris Olave. I just loved that he came into the league as a sort of almost ready to run any route, like no training wheels from him. His ADOT was over 14 yards, right? Like it was downfield stuff. It was literally every route. They didn't simplify anything for Chris Olave, and he was better than his quarterbacks last year. And like whatever you think of Derek Carr's like a year removed from 4,800 yards in a playoff appearance. So we could get a good season from Derek Carr. And if that happens, now we're talking about Olave as the sort of player who could be 1,300 yards, 1,400 yards, 100, 110 catches. I think he's that level of talent.
Yeah. So let me piggyback off the notion of more work, more volumes, more attempts. And I want to talk about a player who, there was a video of him talking to his head coach and the GM yesterday, talking he wants more receiving work, talking, of course, about Miles Sanders. Basically he's the best running back they have in Carolina. If he's able to get, anywhere close to his receiving production that he did in his rookie season, which I believe was over 500 yards, he's coming off of his most productive season as a pro, again, going to Carolina in free agency. I'm going to throw another name, and I want to see if there is an association in your mind or whether or not I'm just being too high on him. Could Miles Sanders be this year's Josh Jacobs from last
year? Here's the way I'll preface that. I have Chris Harris and I have basically been on Josh Jacobs' island since he came into the league. Like Josh Jacobs is just that good. Josh Jacobs is, he's been like, in terms of missed tackles, in terms of elusiveness stats, almost nobody's been better than Josh Jacobs since he came into the league. That is what the eye test will tell you. That is what the people who are charting things will tell you. He's great. And I thought that he, like, the number of people that were telling fantasy players, oh, you got to stay away from that situation. It's going to be a committee. Oh, Patriots, McDaniel, all that. Like, Josh Jacobs is so much better than any other running back on that team. And he's so much better than all but, 5 or 6 running backs in the game, in my opinion. So I've always had just about the highest opinion of Josh Jacobs. And so I think he's a pretty special player. I don't think Miles Sanders is as good. If we're just talking, though, about somebody who is set up for 290, 300, 320 touches, that is for sure Sanders. It's a weird career. Like, nobody thought coming out of his rookie season that, oh man, this guy is gonna like he was an effective enough receiver as a rookie, and then by his second year, his hands just did not. He was suddenly Sean Green, right? Like, hands didn't function. Bunch of terrible moments as a receiver, and it's been a bit like that ever since. And then you get typecast, and so I think he is definitely in a situation where the change of scenery is a good thing. The fact that he's with a coaching staff where they kind of shake the Etch-a-Sketch and they don't pretend that they know exactly what he can do and can't do. Like, I think that's a good thing for him. I'm pretty high on him right now. Like, I've got him as a top, I don't know if I have him as RB10 or RB12, like, just on situation. I think it's great. I think there's a non-trivial chance that all that team wants to do is run. They don't have much of a receiving core, right? Pretty good line, pretty good defense. The division is winnable. They might just want to run all day. Like, they might want to run like 35 or 40 times a game. And just ask the fresh-faced quarterback to do enough. I think that's a real possibility. So I think Sanders is absolutely one of those guys who I don't see him in the Josh Jacobs class of runner. I don't see him certainly in the Nick Chubb, Taylor, Christian McCaffrey class of runner. But just on volume and on the fact that he's a very serviceable player, I think he could have a big year, and I think he deserves. I think he deserves to be ranked as like a fringy RB1, high-end RB2.
Yeah, the Miles Sanders thing has sort of been happening for years, where people kind of, like you said, sold him off after a couple of years because he wasn't getting those touchdown numbers. But now that as time has gone on, he's coming. Last year, he signs a big contract. He gets into a situation where he doesn't have to share with a Jalen Hurts or a Kenny Gainwell or anybody. So like Gator J just said, he could be a top 6 running back in the Scott Fish Bowl just due to points per carry alone. So, there's a lot going on with there, and I agree with you.
Points per carry is wild, man. Points per carry is just wild. Like, I'm for it. If we're going to play points per reception, we might as well play points per carry. But right. That's a wild setting.
Yeah, get your Najee Harris stocks up now. For real. So, but before we get into the second segment where we talk about late round league winners, just a reminder for everybody that you've liked what you've seen and heard thus far, go on over, give us a follow on YouTube, and subscribe to us wherever you listen to your podcast. So let's go ahead and shift those gears and let's move into the part where we talk about draft strategy. And that's where, in a lot of places, finding those late round guys sometimes truly sets apart your champions from your challengers. Every year we have these unknown assets that kind of emerge from the wire or late in drafts. 2018, James Conner comes out of nowhere coming off of cancer, has those first big weeks, ends up with a 225-point year. James Robinson, undrafted in 2020, gets added late in camps. Last year, you had Isaiah Pacheco come out rookie year, Jerick McKinnon. So these things happen every year where you have this guy that's late and kind of bust out and helps people win a lot of games and ultimately leagues. So we kind of wanted to go there today. And with you here, we kind of wanted to discuss some of those guys who are ready to take your teams over the top, Sylvester Stallone style. So with that said, Andy, go ahead and give us a couple guys in the audience, a few players that might be flying under the radar and have some special potential here in 2023.
Yeah, I don't want to, you guys have already mentioned the idea that there are so many late round running backs that are super interesting. And I do tend to think this year, and this might, I don't know, maybe this is a case of wide receiver kind of falling off a cliff in my mind. I don't know if that really happens, but there are, like, I don't know, once we get outside the top 120, 125 picks, there's still a bunch of running backs on the board that I find super interesting. Guys who I think could really fall into sizable workloads, or they're the Jerick McKinnon type where it doesn't really matter if they find a sizable workload because it's the Chiefs, they score 35 a game, right? So McKinnon's certainly one of those guys. The guy's coming off like a 10 touchdown season, and we're drafting him basically as if it never happened. But he's tied to a Death Star offense. He's really good. He's a devastating blocker, right? Like, he's just a useful guy to have on the field, and it's the damn Chiefs. So he can be one of those guys. Roschon Johnson can be one of those guys. The Bears backfield is kind of wide open right now. Khalil Herbert's a really good player, but he's got pass protection issues. Johnson just looks like a horse. It's a total run committed team. I mean, I think Johnson can be great. Kendre Miller, great collegiate back. Pretty murky backfield. I think, like, if I had to pick a running back that's like outside that top 100, 120, and we were talking, top of the show about the notion of a guy who's not, he's not purely a backup, but he also has standalone value. It's probably Elijah Mitchell for me. It is probably what I'm going to be by the time it's all said and done, when we get to the finish of draft season. I bet he's going to be one of my most targeted players, right? Because just fits perfectly if you're building out a zero RB roster, right? Because you don't have to think about him early. You can actually start him in week one. Like, he's not just a guy with contingent value. He's gonna be seeing like 10 carries a game right off the bat. Clearly not a heavy dose of receiving usage or anything like that, but he's gonna play like 35-40% of the snaps when both he and Christian McCaffrey are healthy. And, I don't need to tell somebody who's watching a fantasy show in late June that Christian McCaffrey has an injury history, right? Like, anytime that McCaffrey misses, Elijah Mitchell's going to eat those touches up. So he's in a situation where anything happens to CMC, and all of a sudden Mitchell is an obvious RB1. And even in weeks when CMC is playing, Mitchell's probably still in line for double-digit touches if everything goes to script for the 49ers, who, again, are going to run all day and are probably going to be leading most of the season. And like, they look like one of the best teams in the NFC. So Mitchell for me is probably my prime guy that I'm going to reach for once we get outside like the first 10 rounds in drafts. If I had to mention a wide receiver, I guess the guy that I've landed most often so far, really late, is Nico Collins, which is not, I don't mean that as an endorsement of the Texans offense necessarily, but he is pretty clearly his team's wide receiver one. He's got the size, it certainly has the look of a contested catch winner. He's had some really, really nice moments in his first 2 years. Health has been an issue, but he's just kind of an unrivaled wide receiver one right now that generally gets overlooked in drafts.
And I love that you mentioned Nico Collins, because currently, according to Fantasy Pros, he is currently going as the wide receiver 62, which is just, I think I tweeted this out last week, is entirely too low for a guy who has, could be at least a top 40 receiver this year. So,
yeah, I had
Drew.
Nico was my, it was the one that I was feeling the same thing about.
So, Drew, go ahead and elaborate on it too. Elaborate on that. Who are some guys that you're looking at that have that special value?
Yeah, I
later
mean,
rounds.
apparently we could rename the show the Nico Collins Fan Club because he was also a guy that I had written down as well. So we love Nico over here, I guess. I'm gonna get kind of gross with the position because I'm gonna talk about tight end, but
Yeah.
Tyler Higbee is tight end 16 right now. He's 138 overall, and he's whenever I'm looking at later round tight ends, once we get past the elite guys, I want to try to find a guy who his range of outcomes is being the second target in his offense. And with Tyler Higbee, I still think that's clearly the case. I would pick him over Van Jefferson or Puka Nacua or Tutu Atwell. And Addison Hayes tweeted out not long ago a list of tight ends with 145 plus PPR points the last 2 years. And it was a list of guys it was 5 guys that are pretty much in everybody's consensus, like top 7 or 8 tight ends for this year. And then it was Tyler Higbee. And so the offensive line's improved. Stafford should have more time to throw this year. Hopefully he'll be able to be upright long enough to stay healthy. And if the offensive line's improved, if Stafford stays healthy, I don't see a world where Tyler Higbee doesn't outperform that ADP. I don't think he finishes at tight end 16. And then going a little bit further down the list, the 14th round running back 56. I know that he's not the most popular one right now because there's a new shiny toy in Miami, but I still like Jeff Wilson quite a bit too. I love the commitment they gave to him whenever he was healthy as soon as they traded for him last year. And I think out the gate, he would be my pick to be the early down runner in that Miami offense that we all seem to like quite a bit. And so if I can take a shot on who I think might be their starting running back in the 14th round, I'm more than happy to do so. So those are 2 guys I like quite a bit. And then the other one, I won't go too in depth with him because his name's been brought up already, but I'm also a huge Kendre Miller fan as well. And so if I can, right now he's running back 45, 140 overall going in the 11th round. I'll take that all day.
Yeah, that I hate to follow up with another tight end conversation, but I feel like that we all are in agreement that all the names that between Andy and everybody else have touched on with some of the running backs and the receivers, a lot of the backs that I had looked at are kind of a blend of both opportunity because they're on a high potent offense and the likelihood that I can just plug them in at some point if need be and not take a goose egg is there. But then also the role of if then and there's a lot of them. Kendre Miller, as you mentioned, we don't know about Alvin Kamara. The same thing applies in Cincinnati. We were talking earlier about our fellow Illini, Chase Brown, and Joe Mixon's hearing, I believe, got moved to tomorrow. And so they're going to have, that's still pending. What does that mean? I don't know. I'll ask Drew Davenport, who's our, resident lawyer that's on the case with all those things. But what it does mean is that it's something worth monitoring. And I don't trust Travion Williams to step in and have a significant role as far as a high volume and a value driven role, or at least valuable touch role. And that's where I think Chase Brown, we saw it at Illinois. I mean, he's capable of between the backs. He's capable of having running to the outside if they want to do any of the plays that we saw Mixon, I say successfully run. It's kind of hard with Mixon because so many people are anti. But at tight end, you said, Drew, that you want the number 2 receiver on ideally an offense is going to be moving the ball. But it's not quite as much in Chickakwankwo, which everybody loves. Everybody's taken a stab on. But I look at a guy, I want a tight end now. And Andy, you can back this up for 20 years now. Every tight end outside of tight end 5 is 4 receptions, 44 yards. 4 receptions, 44 yards. Yep. Give me that guy. And you hope he scores a touchdown. And it's like, he's tight end 1 this week, and he's tight end 35 next week because he catches 2 passes for 24 yards. Well, Kwankwo does the one thing that I want is he spreads the field. He had 32 receptions last year, and 14 of which went for more than 20 yards. Now, I'm not saying that that's more than likely to be sustainable, but we saw that he's capable of stretching the field, capable of having the big plays. Him and Greg Dulcich, both of those guys that the double-digit points on the majority of their outings means if he's worked into that offense and Treylon Burks is the one, he's clearly, Derrick Henry's the one. We know that as far as the offense goes. But I don't think there's a case to be made that he's probably the number 2 option there. And I don't know. I feel like his ADP's rising up more and more as we talk. So maybe I should shut up.
If I can piggyback on that just a sec, because you said a couple things that I just struck me. Number one, like the biggest throwaway thing that we say in fantasy in terms of analysis is like, oh, I think somebody can be like a top 8 fantasy tight end. Well, thanks. Like there's going to be like every year. There's just like 4 randos who finish with 6 touchdowns. And by virtue of that, they are a top 8 fantasy tight end or a top 10 fantasy tight. It doesn't mean anything, right? It doesn't mean that they're substantially better than the guys who are 10 spots below them who happen to finish with 3 touchdowns. Like it's not reflective of skill. And the other thing I wanted to mention is I just like this is based on a draft experience that I have had over the past few days. I'm in a couple of like really slow moving Rasball operated drafts, and we're getting through like some rookie portions of dynasty drafts, and I am seeing Sam Laporta go as like the 3rd tight end in rookie drafts, which to me is just scandalous. Obviously I have landed him. He's in the best position by far. Like I get the argument for Kincaid. Sam Laporta is walking into a situation where he is probably the number 2. The team, really good offense, right? Like an offense that moved the ball last year. They threw 12 touchdown passes to tight ends last year. 2 of those tight ends, most people can't even name, right? The other was TJ Hawkinson, who is dealt mid-year. They threw the ball to the tight end position a ton, and Laporta is so good. He's so good. He was like as an after the catch receiver, he was unbelievable last year. That he played in an offense that just did not move the ball. Right, the Iowa offense was basically the Iowa defense. So for him to have like 600 receiving yards in a season at Iowa. That was like a 1,500 yard year anywhere else. Like Laporta's great. And I get the argument for Kincaid. But there's another tight end there who's pretty good and who got paid. There are other receivers who are pretty good. It's Laporta and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Like we're not going to see Williams for a while. Laporta's in a great situation. He should be the number 1 rookie tight end. I think Laporta can finish as a top 5 overall tight end as a rookie. And I don't say that about rookie tight ends very often at all, but I think that is very much in play.
Gator J is in the chat asking the Lord Voldemort of questions, and one that none of us really want to be able to answer is, when can we expect Travis Kelce to fall off? Will that be 2023? If ever.
Did you guys see him slumping in the Super Bowl? Did he look, did he look cooked in the Super? I mean, no, he's the most dominant player at the position. He's also the most bankable tight end that we've ever seen, right? Like hasn't he been the tight end 1 in PPR in like 6 of the last 7 years? And that other year he was like tight end 2. He doesn't miss. And he was great. I don't know. He's great like 5 months ago. Why would he not be? Why would he not be great this season? That's one that I'm just not going to overthink. And I get I get where he is in terms of age, but when you look across all sports and you start talking about like the literal best to ever do it at their positions, those guys also tend to age differently than the rest of the population of athletes. And I just think that we're seeing that with Travis Kelce. There's almost every position I can make an argument for several different guys finishing number 1 overall. It's really hard to do at tight end. Like any argument for another player being the tight end 1 this year has to begin with Travis Kelce suffers an injury that we don't see coming, right? It has nothing to do with them being better than Travis Kelce. They are not.
Yeah, and I'm not one to be in the injury prediction business by any means. That topic came up about long last night, and Kelce's kind of just been in this territory with me where I'm just not even going to try to guess or predict when the fall off is going to happen. Like, to me, in my eyes, he's just going to ball every single year until he decides to ride off into the sunset. And if he does fall off, I won't predict it. I'll probably have him rostered. I'm going to keep drafting him. He's just somebody that I'm just going to be good with until he decides to hang him up. Because he hasn't shown any signs of slowing down whatsoever. It was supposed to happen whenever he turned 30, I think is what I was told. And then since then he's put up 2 tight end 1 seasons and a tight end 2 season. And so I don't see it happening anytime soon. I'm not going to be the one to try to predict it.
He's leaning right now. He's a little tired, but I give him some support back there.
Oh yeah, I didn't even notice that back there. Yeah, that's the most leaned over I've seen Kelce so far in his career. In the background.
He's done a lot of partying in the off season, so that might explain part of it.
And his brother did a lot of beer chugging the other night. If you saw that video, that was pretty impressive. Yeah. So I have a couple players. I generally, this may be a crazy strategy to some. I like targeting players in the later rounds that are on good offenses. So Jacksonville, Tank Bigsby going in the 13th round. I love that.
Yeah.
You talk about the Bengals. Tyler Boyd, as you've seen a decline in targets, seen a decline in production. It's really become the Chase and Higgins show. However, if I have a deep enough bench, I'll go grab Irv Smith. I'm not ready to give up on a 24-year-old tight end just yet. Is he somebody who's going to be my starter? No, but is he somebody who could be a third tight end? Bye-week fill-in potentially with upside on a high volume passing offense. I feel like the Bengals, if memory serves me correctly, they were a pass to run ratio of 63 or 60-40. So I like that. I like the Laporta talk you just said right there. But there's somebody I found that he's going in the 16th round, and I think it is massively egregious given what we were talking about earlier with this whole team-centric approach to finding fantasy value. And that's Hunter Renfrow. Again, he is a year removed from a 1,000-yard season with 9 touchdowns on 100 receptions. He had a down year last year, 10 games played, injury. He's the number 2 receiving option on this team, but, there's no Darren Waller. Yes, Devonta Adams will get his. But we talk about, the metrics that align with one another. We look at his average depth of target last year, 6.5. Jimmy Garoppolo, assuming that he's the quarterback and he's healthy and good to go this year, average depth of target, 7.3. Again, I'm not trying to poo-poo on Devonta Adams. Devonta Adams can catch the ball anywhere and just score. That's not an issue. But when we're looking at the target volume, again, no Derek Waller, number 2 receiver. The quarterback throws in his range. And again, I get it. He had a down year, but again, we saw how well Renfrow played when he was the number 2 receiver back in 2021, when coincidentally Waller was out for most of the season with injury. So in the 16th round, given that team situation, I am 100% trying to get Hunter Renfrow on my roster.
Now, Jorge, I do have a question for you because they also brought in Jacoby Myers this offseason. Not worried about it?
For me, it's the window, the area of the field that these receivers are going to be targeted by their quarterback. I get the Jacoby Myers free agency pull. Jacoby Myers, his scored his first touchdown last year, and then gave away his first touchdown. He threw his first interception for a touchdown to Chandler Jones last year. So I'm not really team Jacoby Myers. I'm on team targets in the 16th round of my draft. I'm looking at team receptions. I'm looking at the opportunity. And, again, I go back to the average of the target, Jimmy G 7 to Renfro's 6.5. Renfrow is a target monster when he's given the opportunity. Quarterbacks, Derek Carr loved to target him. I truly believe the reason why you saw the different production last year was not only just because of, his health being an issue. It's, hey, Derek Carr, I have my best friend down now in Las Vegas who likes to go deep. I'm really an accurate deep ball passer. And for whatever reason, the coaching staff was like, yeah, we'll forget about the majority of everybody else on the team. Maybe Matt Collins will have a good game or two, but let's give it to Devonta Adams. Well, I think this year, I think they're going to have to realize you're going to have to stay within your level of comfort here and create a nice, safe environment for these offensive weapons. And that's why in the 16th round, I can't pass up on Hunter Renfrow.
Solid argument you're making there. So, guys, looking at the time, that's about it. We're going to wrap up tonight. A huge thank you once again to our man, Andy Behrens, for joining us tonight. If you're not already, and you absolutely should be, please be following him on Twitter at Andy Behrens. So, Andy, the stage is yours. Before you leave, what are you working on? Go ahead and plug things for us. What you got going on, man?
Oh, listen, I just want to thank you guys. The show is great. Cast is great. Hi. Oh, hi.
She can't hear you. I mute you from her so that she doesn't get too excited. You get too big of britches. but she does want
Yeah.
to say hi.
Special. Anybody want a peanut shout out? I almost wore that shirt tonight. This is great. The show is super fun. You guys do awesome work. So it's absolutely my pleasure to come on. I'm still slogging through baseball content. We'll probably be flipping the switch and we'll be football full time. We'll be podcasting. I think once we get into August, the fantasy football forecast will be back every day, 5 days a week. So looking forward to that. We just need to get through the fourth, get through, that little dead period after the MLB All-Star game, and then all of a sudden camps are opening and we're in it. And then there's real news to report.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. We have to ask you, since Bob Lung was here last night going off script, will you be at the Expo this year or what?
Oh, I haven't missed one. Yeah. Love it. Absolutely going to be there.
Awesome. Well, we'll see you there. All of our fantasy and friends people that will be there. So, guys, also before we leave, don't forget to follow our man Jorge Edwards at Jorge B. Edwards, Nate at Nate Markham, Drew at Drew3MR, and myself at Armanuel Sports, as well as our show's account at Fourth and Frames. Don't forget to visit our website, fantasyandframes.com, for the latest fantasy football content. Also, thanks again for hanging out with us tonight. We'll see you all next Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern time. Be blessed. Y'all have a great night. We out.